So that's yours.
Okay. First, thank you for coming. Out of the 3 practices that we do, you have picked the hardest one to do, so good luck. Okay, so with sustained silent reading or giving books to kids and having them read silently for 5 minutes, probably the easiest thing in the world, if you have good books. A PPT book, you just put the PPT on the board and you read the book. So those practices, while they do take a little bit of practice to do, they are not as intensive as what it takes to deliver a story listening lesson correctly and continue with it. Because the first time that you try story listening with your students, it's probably not going to go very well. But we know when we try new things with teaching, the first time is like the Bai Lao Su, like the white mouse class, you know. But I really recommend that once you try it once, the next time is going to get better. But please don't just try it once. If it goes badly the first time, that's okay. It'll go better the second time. So the last time we met, tried to just get most of the theory out of the way, so that then today we can work on more of how to get you ready to try this in a classroom. And I really didn't get to interact with you guys very much, and so I would really like to know your names and what grades you teach, because I'm at a junior high school, but I do some traveling teaching on Thursdays and Fridays, but I primarily only work with grades 5 and 6 when I travel and teach. So if we could start in the back of the class, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us what grades you work with.
I teach 5th grade and 6th grade.
Okay. Do you want to tell us your name, or is it a secret?
Okay, sorry. My name is Leona.
Okay, thank you.
And my name is Mandy, and I teach 3rd to 6th.
Okay. You're kind of a small school?
Yes, 1 for each grade.
Okay.
I'm Emma. I teach grade 5th to grade 6th.
Okay.
My name is Payne. I teach 3rd grade.
3rd grade.
My name is Harry. I teach 12th and
3rd and 4th.
My name is Eva. I teach 1st to 5th grade.
Is that legal? Yes. Okay. If it's not, then we don't say anything. I didn't know in Zhanghua County we could start with 1年级. I thought only Hsinchu and Taipei could 开始1年级. We'll take that out of the video. But good, brave of you to start. I bet you do a lot of singing and dancing. Yeah, so maybe you also need lots of coffee every day. Yeah.
Benny, I teach 1st to 6th. Hello, my name is Isha. My students at school are 5th and 6th grade.
Okay.
Joseph. I teach grade 3rd to 6th.
Maya, I teach 6th graders.
6th grade.
And Tris, I teach from grade 3 to grade 6.
Grade 3 to grade 6. Okay, so we're ranging from first year English language learners up till when they become wild animals in 6th grade, 2nd semester. So today I wanted to start with a story. I don't exactly remember what groups you were in last time or what stories you got to hear. I know the first group got to hear about a 3-minute story of Ben Loves Pizza. And then another group got to hear a story, The Flute Player. So can anybody tell me who was there to listen to Ben Loves Pizza? Did anybody listen to that? No. Did anyone listen to Zach tell the story of The Flute Player? Okay, so I'm going to start today with a story, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the story, background of the story. So with my class routine is very important. If you want to be able to use as much English as possible, So I start my students off by saying, okay, please get out your notebook. I require all my students to have a notebook. And I say, okay, please get out your notebook, turn your notebook to the back. I show them the front because with like grade 3, they can't tell the difference between the front and back. I say, this is front, this is the back, open to the back. In the back, we have what we call a story log. Okay, so I say, I'm going to please write in your story log. Now, first I have to explain this is not a log like a piece of wood. This is a log like a list. And in the story log, this is where we write the names of the stories. Well, I don't do this for any kind of assessment. I do it just to see how many stories we get through in a year. Okay, so I would start with say, okay, please open your notebook to the back to our story log. Today's story is called Mr. Cake and Miss Cheese. Now, I heard somebody say the name. Who was it? Did somebody say cheese? Did somebody already know? Do you know the story? You heard Zach tell this story? You going around? Ah, okay. So don't give away any secrets. Okay, so the story is called Mr. Cake and Miss Cheese. Now, of course, for our very young learners, we would have to go through what these words mean. I don't necessarily draw right away with the name because most students will know cake. So you will act as my students today. So I'll say, students, cake system. What is cake? Good. And how about cheese? Cheese. Now, what if we say Mr. Cake? Somebody said, what does it mean, Mr. Cake? And Miss Cheese. Good. So this is our story name. Okay, now under the story, I want you to write 1 and 2. We'll get to this later. Okay, then I say, put everything away. And you all know the reason why. Even if, like, there's a piece of chalk on the table, during story time, they will find some reason to play with the chalk. Yes, especially little kids. Not even little kids, up to grade 9. If I even leave their name cards on the desk, they will start to fiddle with it. And there's only two really rules I ask them to follow with story listening. I'll put on the side. For story listening, I ask, please, I want you to please listen. Listen. I'll draw a little ear. Please listen and look. So look and listen. This is all you have to do for story listening. Okay, so while they're putting everything away, I erase the board. And then, of course, I have to walk around and check and be like, Joey, put away your water bottle. Okay, now okay, good. Did you write 1, 2? Okay, good. Of course, this is a necessary step, even after many stories. Okay, then I wait for a little pause of quiet before I start. I start every story with a long time ago. A long time ago. So a long time ago, there were 2 people. And we can say we can have one person or 2 people. So in this story, 2 people. The 2 people, they lived in a kitchen. Kitchen 是什么? What is kitchen? 大声一点好不好? So there's 2 people, they lived in a kitchen. Now, one person lived in the oven. What is an oven? One person lived in the oven. And the other person lived in the refrigerator. Oof, very long word. So I say 你也可以说 fridge. 也可以说 fridge. Sometimes I will write out refrigerator. And then I just say fridge. 也可以. We'll use fridge. So one person lived in the oven and one person lived in the fridge. In the oven lived Mr. Cake. This is Mr. Cake. Mr. Cake was a little strange. 奇怪, a little strange. Because Mr. Cake at night, Mr. Cake would go into the kitchen to play. So sometimes Mr. Cake would open the oven, go into the kitchen to dance. Sometimes Mr. Cake would open the oven and go into the kitchen to sing. But one day, Mr. Cake said, Mr. Cake said, I want to go to a new place. A new place. 新的地方, a new place. He says, whoa, there is the fridge. I want to go. So that night, Mr. Cake, he opened the oven, walked to the fridge, goes to the fridge, Mr. Cake, and he I pause for a dramatic effect. Mr. Cake opened the oven, and inside the oven, Mr. Cake saw Miss Cheese. Miss Cheese. Mr. Cake said, oh my God. Oh my God. OMG. There are some words I abbreviate. OMG, the students know. Or IDK. I don't know. I put sometimes like that. Mr. Cake sees Miss Cheese and he, his hands, oh my God. Miss Cheese, you are so beautiful. So beautiful. The students will know the word, beautiful. You don't have to translate. If you don't have to translate, don't translate. Just continue to flow. You are so beautiful. Miss Cheese, I love you. I don't keep it grammatically or even structurally correct all the time, especially with young learners, because we learn how to type on our phones these days, and we learn how to type little things like this. So I'm not doing this to be lazy, okay? So he says, I love you. And then Mr. Cake, he gets an idea. Mr. Cake, he gets down. Oh, so sorry, Teacher Ted. On one knee. And he says, please, Miss Cheese, I love you. I love you. Please, please, marry me. Please, please, Miss Cheese, marry me. Miss Cheese looks at Mr. Cake. No. No. Go away. This is where I have to translate. So, okay, go away. Kids love it when you do that. I don't know why, but they will laugh. Oh, Mr. Cake, he, TT. He starts. And Mr. Cake has to walk back to the oven. And that night, Mr. Cake, he cries all night. But every day, Meitian, every day, Mr. Cake Miss Cheese, I really love you. I really love you. Please, Miss Cheese, marry me. And every day, Miss Cheese looks, no, Mr. Cake, I don't love you. Go away. This happens every day for 3 years. 3 years. Until one day, Miss Cheese, now she wears yellow lipstick after 3 years. Need to change, your look. Miss Cheese, she starts to think. She thinks, maybe this is true love. Janai, true love. So again, just like every day, Mr. Cake comes to Miss Cheese, says, please marry me. Miss Cheese looks. Okay. Miss Cheese says, okay. And she reaches out her little cheese hand, and then, now they are Mr. and Mrs. Cheesecake. Oh, Mrs. Cheesecake, she has a baby. She has a baby. It is a baby cheesecake. Well, that's not a very good line. A baby cheesecake. The end. Okay, that story takes about 10 minutes to tell. Curious what you think. Do you think that your students, would this story be too hard for them? Do you notice anything on here that might be a little difficult? Yes? Mary. Okay, so this is something that you would have to directly translate. I try to do it with like a little TPR where I get down and I put out my finger like this instead of. They still don't understand. No, nobody could answer that question. So this would be then for your group of students something to directly translate. But first, I wanted to tell you a little bit about this story. So in your story log, if you were my students, you wrote the name of the story, and then I asked you to write 1, 2 at the bottom. These are questions, 2 questions that I used to ask my students. Now I don't ask my students. I don't bother with it. But it's a good way to start as being new to story listening, to find out what worked for your kids. Okay, so question number 1 is, do you like the story? do you like the story? And I do it with stars. So I would put 1 star would mean I don't like the story. 2 stars, do you like the story? A little. 3 stars, just okay. 4 stars, I like it. 5 stars, I really like it. Then question number 2. 懂不懂这个故事的英文? Do you understand the English in the story? 1 star. 全部不懂 Cake 是什么? Okay, and then you go in order from not understanding to 5 stars being 没有问题, no problem. Okay. Now the only reason that I do this is for me to see, so I can walk around and find out. Usually students will be very hesitant about putting 1 star here if you ask them to then give the answer. So I used to say, well, let's call you class 603, okay? So I would go like this. I would say, today we have 27 students, question 1, question 2, 1 to 5. And I'd have them raise their hand. Okay, so for question, do you like this story? Who put 1 star? And then I started to find out that students would just put like 3 or 4 if do you understand the story, because they were embarrassed to publicly admit in front of their class that they didn't understand. So now what I would do, I got to the point where I would just kind of walk around and look at their papers just to see. And the only reason I would do this would be it would help me find out what stories clicked with the students and what stories flopped with the students. Now, the reason I share this story with you, because this is a special story for me. Last year, I was a teacher in New Taipei City. And in November, I went to go see Dr. Krashen and Dr. Mason give a lecture about story listening, reading, and how important they are, and how story listening is a really great practice for building kids' interests in stories and then eventually leading to a reading program. And so in November, I ditched my curriculum and just started doing story listening in my school in New Taipei City. So last year I taught grades 7 and 8. By the time the students in grades 7 and 8 had heard about 25 stories, I asked them, if you want, you can write a story, English story for fun. And I'll pick the one that I like the most, and we'll put it in our journal, our school journal, and I'll teach the story to the class, to the students, all my students. So this story was written by a 7th grade student at a public school in New Taipei City. They wrote it all by themselves. I had not taught any of this, but they had just acquired it from the structure that we'd heard through about 25 stories. Okay, so we have what sometimes for myself, I'll analyze stories when I'm looking for stories of using what we call like a story mountain, where the story has a beginning, there's a problem in the story, there's a solution to that problem, and then the story ends. And so this story follows that structure very beautifully. The story starts, Mr. Cake, he's a little weird. The problem in the story is he meets the woman of his dreams, but she doesn't reciprocate his feelings. The solution is after, all these failed attempts, finally it works, and the end, they are a happy couple, have a beautiful cheesecake baby. So this is a story that I tell now to junior high school and elementary school kids, because I've never had a class of students tell me that they didn't like the story. And it's important when you pick your first story to tell with story listening, you need to pick what Dr. Krashen calls a home run story. A home run story, a story that the kids are instantly going to be like, what? Like, that was awesome, and this is one of 2. that I'll always start the year with. I either start with Mr. Cake and Miss Cheese or Ben Loves Pizza. And Ben Loves Pizza is just kind of a weird story that's much simpler than this. It's much more repetitive. And we can get into that in a little bit. Okay, so this is a great resource. This is what I first joined. Now, I don't know how big you guys are on Facebook, but this is an option. There is a story listening Facebook group, and it also is just a wonderful place for people that are also starting off, and what stories they're using, what problems they're encountering. And something that comes up a lot is, how do you balance something like story listening with what our administration expects us to do? And so this is a great page just to try to get some questions answered. I'm more than happy to answer personally, but obviously our situations are going to be a little different. But there's not a lot of people in Taiwan using story listening too, so it's relatively new for us here. So, okay, what I wanted to talk about also is, how do we pick our stories? How do we pick our stories? So the first story I usually tell, I said, with Ben Loves Pizza. The next story I usually go off of is Mr. Cake and Miss Cheese. The reason I do Ben Loves Pizza is because I wrote that story for 3rd grade elementary school. It contains almost no words that need to be translated. And once we start moving into more advanced stories, you're going to start to come up with a lot of different tenses, a lot of different abnormalities in English language might need to be explained. And you start using less pictures and you start writing more. So it's really good when you're starting off with story listening to start with stories that are pretty short and stories that include a lot of things that you can draw. Now, in your handout for CAS, drawing for story listening, most of the time, the things that we draw are people, animals, places, feelings, and things. Last year, around this time, I made the very terrible decision of telling a classic Chinese tale called The Great Race, which was the Jade Emperor deciding what animals were going to be, which year that they were going to. So, oh my God, having to draw, like consistently, like a sheep, a pig, a dragon, the Jade Emperor themselves, like trying to get across the river. It was just like a nightmare for drawing. And so you can see on the handout for CAS for drawing, she actually gives a picture of a dragon on page 2. So this is how we deceive our students in a way that makes story listening much easier for us to deliver and not interrupt the flow of a story. Okay, so can somebody give me the name, just any like animal or thing? A mouse. Okay, so a mouse, 2 circles, a tail, 2 ears. And then you just write mouse. And now this is your mouse for your picture. As long as you stay consistent with this throughout the story, it'll work. But, then if you defer into something, like this and say, well, now that's my mouse, the kids might start to get a little confused. You want it to be like somewhere, like I watched this documentary on abstract art and like our idea of this as a heart. It's just enough for us to understand. If we turn this entirely into a pixel, it would just be a red square, which would not be comprehensible. But then if you went in the opposite direction and drew all the valves and the veins and made it look very realistic, you're taking way too much time. Okay, so we try to find somewhere in the middle where it's not really abstract, where you have to like, it's a waste of time and it interrupts comprehension of the story. So we try to find something, and this is why today I should have asked, did everybody bring a pen or a writing utensil? We're all set here? No, you're not going to draw on a phone today. We're going to draw on paper. Do you guys have a writing utensil? Yeah. Good? We're good here? And we're good here? Okay, yes. We do not draw digitally for story listening. The reason being is because when it's crunch time and you have to do it on the board, if you did all that practicing on the computer and then you have to do it on a chalkboard, it might not work. So today we're going to be doing some drawing. I'm going to have you pick a story, and then you're going to draw it for us up here. So we'll get to that. So picking a story. This is part of our Stories First Foundation, one of the projects that we do, the Great Story Reading Project. This is my account. So it's a great site for finding stories. So does anybody have a classic story that you really like? Folk tale or? No? Okay, so type in, this is a story I used last week. Gretel. Hansel and Gretel. Okay, so I did Clever Gretel. Clever Gretel is an intermediate story. It's one of the Brothers Grimm folk tales. It's a very old story. And you can see, here we have the text. That's kind of a little off. Okay, so if we look at the length of the text, let's just go through. It's scary to look through. And then we look at some words. Oh, she tore off a little bite of chicken. Okay, I would never in Taiwan include she tore off a little bite of chicken. There's too many words even in that little passage for me to have to try to explain. Okay, so I took this story last week. I'll have to get out of the We Bear Bears. Okay, and I wanted you guys to see my class, because it's always, you go to lectures and you hear people talk about teaching practices, but then you're like, what are the kids doing in that class, during that lesson? So I wanted you to get to see a little bit of how the kids respond to the story. So here is Clever Gretel. Let's see if we can get one where the kids are a little further out. Now, this story is 25 minutes long. I start the year usually with stories about 5 to 7 minutes long, and this is one of the longest stories. I did one that was 60 minutes long, but this one is pretty difficult for 25-minute story. Let's see. I think this one has a little better zoom out of the kids. Something you make, use it, eat it. It looks like. Okay, so let's go to the people. I had a question. Give you 1,000, not 1,000. Okay, so when I told you that story listening is a little different, a little more difficult than PPT books or sustained silent reading. And here's an example of why. Okay, so in the story, I'm sure are you guys familiar with the story of the Pied Piper or the flute player, where he leads the rats out of town and then he doesn't get paid, and so he kidnaps all the children. So in the story, he's walking out of town. Here the rats are following him. The man Now, I had one student, when I started to draw the water, she said, "Oh, it's a lake. It's a lake." Now, if you had a PPT book, you would have to describe the difference between a lake and a river just with words, okay? But she said a lake. And so it gave me a teachable moment to say, here's a lake. So SL provides you the opportunity to guide the story in the way that a PPT book couldn't do. And that I could then explain the difference between here's what a lake looks like, but in the story there's actually a river that runs next to the town. This is a normal class. The kids, the camera was pretty far away, and the kids didn't really know that the camera was running. And we don't see... Is this what? No, at LJIS we have 80 students. 80 students. There are 10 more girls than boys. But in my classes, I always ask the girls to sit in front. Do you know why? Do you want to guess? The girls are so quiet. Okay, so I have no problem with the boys in the back being able to talk, but it just got so tired of me being like, "What did you say?" And like I'd have to walk back and be like, "Oh, okay," and then having to like, so I just say, "Girls, you have to sit in the front." So this is a story. Actually, I wasn't ready to tell this story. Zach told the story at the last workshop, and I thought, that's a great story, and it was a winner. Actually, I get a lot of my story ideas now from Zach. Clever Gretel was a home run story. This story was shot on an iPhone 10. Oh man, the video, and then we look at this one. This is from like, I don't know about your schools, but maybe you guys have video cameras in your schools that have like been there for 12, 15 years. And that's the video quality that you get from that. This camera also is probably approaching that similar age, teenage years. And then I had a teacher come in and bring out her iPhone. And it's just like night and day. Come on, Wi-Fi. This story, I wrote this story. This story is about a cannibalistic teacher who cooks her students and feeds them to them after the test. So this is a way that I could then personalize the story to include students. This is a great way. Once you get pretty like comfortable with it, you can start adapting characters in your book or in your story. So in this, like, I have a boy in class who just for some reason he is apprehensive to being friendly to me. I think because he kind of wants to prove himself and his English isn't very good. And so all I did is in this story, I had our teacher at our school, her name is Kimberly. I had her turn him into steak and meat pudding. His name is Luke. And now Luke likes me so much. And it's only because I killed him in the story and fed him to the rest of the students. And that's all it took. All it took for things to turn around. And that's another big difference. I don't know what's happening with the internet, which is why story listening is so cool, because you just use a chalkboard. You don't need the internet. So, how to find stories. A great resource is the Great Story Reading Project. This website is a free teacher-to-teacher wiki that includes folk tales from around the world. But both Zach and I can attest to this, that even the easiest stories on this website are not suitable for our student population. And a big reason for that is it's really hard to level stories, especially when some of these people are public school teachers in the US or something like that. And so their idea of what is a beginner level story for us would be something reaching more advanced. So it takes a lot of adaptation on our part. And so I wanted to transition at this point to start involving you guys a little bit. So do you guys know the ETAs, the Fulbright ETAs? Does anybody have any experience with them? I asked them last time before we left, I said, I really want you to write down a storybook, an English storybook that you really liked as a kid, that then we can talk about. I have a workshop with them next week where we're going to go over this. And so I wanted to, for you guys, if you could, there should be some space on either the CAS or the prompter handout. If on the back, could you please write a story? Just the name of a story that you really like. It can be any story that you think you might be interested in trying as a story listening lesson. So something kind of short, could be a folk tale, a fairy tale, a storybook, or like I was super excited to tell the story about the great race of the Chinese zodiac. And I still am going to try it this year, but I'm going to draw, like Dr. Mason said, like this might be my dragon this year. And all I would do, I would just add some wings and some teeth. And then I would say, oh, now it's a dragon. And the kids would say, no, it's not. And I'd say, yes, it is. And then move and then stop. So right now, if you could, write down a story. And then we're going to be working with your story today to try to come up with a little simple SL lesson that you can deliver to us here in class. No, it shouldn't be a Western story. No.
It's a Chinese story.
Oh, just a story that you like. A story that we usually try it like if you tell a story that your kids might be familiar with, then it's going to be much more comprehensible to them. Just like the structure of the story, the themes in the story will be much more relatable to a Taiwanese classroom.
Because you said the story on this is too hard for all of us.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that the way that they write the stories, it's not that the stories themselves are too hard, but the English that they use, I have to take the stories and write them again.
My question is because a lot of my students, they do know a lot of Taiwanese stories or Chinese stories, and they may not have any idea about foreign stories.
Well, I mean, it's okay. I can show you on this website. There is a whole section of Chinese stories. And so you can even go from like pre-beginning. There are no stories in pre-beginning. Okay, so there will be stories in Chinese then that the kids might be more familiar with, that then you could adapt from there. So of course not. We're not just looking for Western stories. That would be a disservice to the great like folk tales that you have even here in Taiwan. All right, so we got some time to go around, and you could share the story that you picked that you think you might be good for a story listening lesson. And try to keep in mind that your first story that you tell should be no longer than 10 minutes in its delivery. There's a reason why, because with your first story listening lesson, you want it to be a success. And for a lot of our students, they have not gained a lot of stamina with listening to English only. And so for some of them, it's a real chore to try to listen for longer than 10 minutes their first time. It took me all this semester to get to a 25-minute story. Most of the time I have to just work within 10 to 15-minute framework before they just, there starts to be a little overload. So I've just gotten to a point where kids are asking for longer stories. So if we could go around, the room was gone. And so it's taken a while, but it's back. We're up to about 109 books. So for finding a story, the Great Story Reading Project is a great place to find folk tales. But I also just really like sometimes to go to classic children's storybooks. And maybe if your library is equipped with a lot of good ones, that's great. But I find we have a pretty good selection going, which you can see is just full of beautiful books. Beautiful books. Okay, so we'll get to that as soon as our internet comes back. So no problem. What I want us to do now is we're going to take your story. We're going to break your story into its simplest component parts, and you can just tell a little part of that story. So what I want you to try to do is think of a couple lines or a couple parts of the story that you can write, and then how you can provide supplementation with pictures. Or if you want to look at the CAS, the Comprehension Aiding Supplementation handout, how you can tell that story to us in a comprehensible way. So if you don't want to do this alone, you guys can pick a story together at your group. Like Penguin is a really great story. Did you bring this? Oh, cool. No, we already have this book here, but it's a wonderful book. And this is a really good story listening adaptation because Penguin doesn't talk the whole time until the end. It's a great book. So if you want to work together, that's fine. If you want to just have a little version of your story by yourself, I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity today to see what it's like to go up, start your story, start drawing on the chalkboard while you're telling your story, and then we can come together and talk about how it was, what we can do to improve it, and yeah, because we literally might be waiting all day to pull up the digital library. I wanted to show you guys the library because I want, now that you're in the line group, I can get your email address and I can give you access to these books. So that you guys will have over 100 high quality English storybooks that you can look for. And so I can steal some of Ted's thunder for his PowerPoint creating of books next Friday. You can say, sorry, Ted, we don't need to listen. We got all the books from Ben. It's what? What happened? Why did my number go up so high? Oh, it's a different one. So if you guys want to get ready in your groups of just making maybe a 2 to 3 minute little short version of your story, kind of write a line and then draw a picture together, and then you guys can work together on the board to tell us your story. And I'll see if I can pull up the library. Please do not take a lot of time to draw your pictures. I would like us to draw as badly as possible. She's going to need to be naked at the beginning, so remember that. He burns down everything. Yes. Okay, so I'm gonna take the projector down. So if you could look, just a quick preview. This is the digital library that we have up. Now, for copyright purposes, I cannot say that we're going to provide this to you through the county, but I personally can provide it to you if you just email me. Say, I want the books. Here's our selection of books that we have up so far. Winnie the Witch, wonderful book. We have some Elephant and Piggy books, classics, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. But there's a bunch of books. And it's a great way to be able to share books with your students as a whole class without having to, go through the work. Oh, and I just found this book. This is my newest book that I uploaded. Does anybody know Harold and the Purple Crayon? This makes a perfect story listening story because Harold, he literally draws his way through the whole story. It's a great book. So if you want to have access to this, I use a lot of these as my inspiration for my story listening lessons with younger learners. So that applies to everybody in this room. We teach little kids. Little kids, they're not ready for long folk tales, but they can handle books like from head to toe. So I'm gonna pull this out up the screen so we can get ready. I'm gonna sign out of everybody's account. Use our fancy stick. Every class should have one. Okay, quick. While you're drawing, somebody asked me a question. I think it's good to address. The way you draw people, sometimes people get a little worried about people. They're not easy to draw. So my mentor, Dr. Mason, this is how she draws people. This is her people drawing. If she comes in a little closer, she will draw like the outline of a face. If the person is going to be sad, she might draw like this. If she gets a little closer, but most of the time people will look like this. For me, I have taken that and I draw people just like this. And the majority of your focus should be on the expression of the person. This person's happy. This person is sad. This person is angry. Okay, so you want to be as quick as possible. So this is how I draw people. So if you're drawing the paper bag princess, I know she's going to need a paper bag, but don't spend too much time, especially on things that could require a lot of work. So I'm excited to see what you guys come up with.
Because the ant families are always working hard for finding food to feed their family. One day, they found a big cheese to feed the whole family for the whole winter. So, yes, they were so happy. Cheese? Oh, cheese, sorry. Yeah. Cheese. Big cheese. So, the family carried a big cheese. They wanted to go home because they were too happy. So they cannot stand to sing out loud on their way home. So, however, they passed the jungle where the huge elephant lived. So, the elephant was so angry. He said, "You little tiny ant, how dare you sing out loud in front of my house. You go away. So only the baby ant, so brave. The baby ant said, no, you cannot say that. You should be polite to everyone. So, but however, the big ant was so proud, so he used his big and long trunk to suck full of water to blow away the ant family. Next day, the baby elephant says, we should do something to teach the elephant a lesson. Okay, a lesson? Teach them a lesson. Teach them how to respect others. So they slowly crept into the big elephant's trunk and started, while the elephant was sleeping, started to bite him. Oh, the elephant woke up. Woke up, and said, oh, it's so hard. So he tried hard to get out the whole family of ants. However, so he cried. Stop there, please stop biting me. And the brave baby ant said, now you know how the feeling of our pets, how the feeling of hurts, right? So they take a PT and said, okay, they crept out of the elephant's trunk. Okay, that's the ending part for elephant.
Okay, this lesson is you're big, but you have to respect others. But you are small, but sometimes you can be strong. Yeah, that's the story.
Okay, so what did you like about the story? The TPR. The TPR. TPR is a great comprehension aiding supplementation for like or being blown away. Was it a good story? Nice and short. Nice and short. What is something we could change to make it more comprehensible to our students? More pictures, yes. Like we could have different parts where we could draw the elephant again. And always when you draw something, you should always write the word. So you can have you can say one ant. Oh, then we have more 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ants. So that's where you can provide linguistic supplementation.
I think this part about daddy and brother and
Which is great because we learned those are target vocabulary words from our grade 4, I think, our grade 4 textbook, where we introduce, is it true? Grade 3, yeah, so we can put these words back and they reinforce, recycle language that they've learned from the textbook. So you could write, this is the dad, the mom, the sister, the brother, the baby. Very simple story structure. The one thing that might be the hardest for the students to understand is the moral of the story at the end. So if you think that teaching them, to be big, you also need to respect things that are small, but even being small, you can still be strong. That might be something that you might either want to take out of the story because it just might make it a little too difficult for the students to understand. But this is definitely a story that I would want to use with small kids, like for sure. Great story idea. So thank you. And that's exactly, we have to always adapt our stories to our kids. What we think they're going to like, the linguistic structure that we're going to use, how we're going to pace the story, and how we're going to make it flow. So usually I start on the left top, and I'll move my way across, and then I'll come down on the bottom and move my way across again. I wouldn't necessarily go back to the same elephant and then erase parts of it and like change like its feelings. I would just draw, the elephant again, like you did like with like waking up or crying, or so that you could see the progression of the story. It's all played out. You wouldn't have to have erased any part of it. You could just draw it again very quickly. Yes? Mm.
If you try to, for example, if you tell a 5-minute story, it's different than you tell a 20-minute story.
It would be very, very difficult for you to fill a blackboard with a 5 to 10-minute story. You would either have been drawing too big or writing too big. Like I told you, I've told one 60-minute story where I actually did fill the whole chalkboard, and then I had to erase the chalkboard and fill the chalkboard again. But most of the time, I try to tell a story that I can fit into the whole chalkboard and not have to erase any part of it. If you have to erase, then that's okay. But I think it's.
I wouldn't want to erase the picture I drew because I think I can review the person.
Yes, and actually,
My question is how about story? You just asked that question. A 60-minute story. You might use the blackboard. You might not have to erase the picture.
Yes, and I would always record the story because that took part over 2 lessons, and some kids were like involved in some activities and missed the first part. And so I had the recording available for them to watch on YouTube later so they could see the story. But for you guys, for starting off, there's no way that you're going to fill a whole chalkboard between a 5 and 10-minute story. If you do, please send me the video. I'd be very interested to see how you did that. Are we ready? Paper bag, princess? You can keep saying no and just like wait the clock out, until there's no time.
Can I make a request?
Yes.
I'm very curious about the Ben Loves Pizza story.
The Ben Loves Pizza story.
Can you show us?
Do you want me to say another story? How much money did you pay her to say it? Okay. I just read that story for the first time this last week, and it's such a beautiful story. Okay, so the name of this story is Ben loves Ben loves pizza. I usually don't need to translate pizza because the Chinese for pizza sounds almost exactly the same. Ben, just a Ben. Ben loves pizza. Ben eats. Ben eats pizza every day. Every day, 每天, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, pizza. Breakfast, 早餐, pizza. Lunch, pizza. Dinner, pizza. Sleep, shower, pizza. Oh, 真的, every day, Ben eats pizza. Ben sees apple. Ben sees apple. Apple says, hi. Apple says, eat me, Ben. Eat me, Ben. Ooh, Ben is angry. And Ben says to Apple, no! I love pizza. Ben, ni kan, Ben. Ben, Ben. Ben sees banana. Banana says, hi. Eat me, Ben. Ben, but Ben is angry, and Ben says, no! I love pizza! And Ben to banana. Bye-bye, banana. Banana. Ben. Ben eats pizza. Ben eats pizza. Ben eats all the pizza. All the pizza. So now Ben is a pizza. The end. Okay, for this story, I wrote this story for third grade. Told the story, the students went crazy. They loved it. So I thought, well, the story is very easy. The structure is very easy. It's repetitive, just like the chants that we teach our children. And a lot of children's storybooks are very repetitive. But this one has a little twist. It's a little weird of a story. So I always try to follow it up with a weird question. I say, general, students, 你们喜欢这个故事吗? Do you like this story? Yes. 懂不懂这个故事吗? 懂. And then question 3, I ask him, yes or no. Okay, so you can try it. Ben loves pizza. 是不是? Yes or no? Yes. Ben eats pizza every day. Ben eats all the pizza. Now Ben is a pizza. So will Ben eat Ben? Will Ben eat pizza, Ben? And this is where the students are kind of like, an existential question, or maybe. And now most of the schools I go to where I tell the story, I am no longer teacher Ben, I am pizza Ben. Even at LJIS, I'm still pizza Ben. So it sticks. This story sticks. And I just had I was talking to Maya about assessment and how we as educators, even if we don't necessarily think that always having assessment is a good thing for our kids, our administration still requires it. So on your handout of the Hairy Toe prompter on the back are different assessments that I've given my students. The Hairy Toe, this one. So I try to gauge my assessments based on summaries, different summarizing activities, because we are trying to guide our students to be able to reach some higher order thinking skills. And most of test taking at the higher levels for like the TOEIC or for the Waikao are almost all reading comprehension questions, where kids need to analyze, they need to read a chunk, a passage, and then answer questions about it. So they need to just decipher meaning in a quick way. So I try to gauge my assessment or base my assessments all on different ways of reading comprehension strategies. So I do picture summaries where the kids have to, like my story Mountain, they have to tell me, how does the story start? Is there a problem? Is the problem fixed? How does the story end? And draw that in a picture format. I do ask them to direct translate some words. I do this as a pre-test and a post-test just to see how many words students have acquired. I also do this as a delayed post-test where I'll not review a story for 3-4 months and then ask them some of the words again, and you will be amazed at how many kids can retain the language from these stories. And also the last one is a closed test, where I have a passage from a story and they just have to fill in where that story goes. And so this last week at my school, I asked my students, okay, the school wants to see if you're remembering these stories. And so I said, I want you to look at your story log and I want you to pick one story, and in your group, you're gonna come up and you're gonna retell the story. Now, I really don't like to force my students to speak because that's the #1 cause for anxiety in a language classroom, is being forced to speak English, especially for students who aren't ready to speak. But my students were able, I had a group volunteer, they came up and retold Ben Loves Pizza word for word, and they hadn't heard that story in 4 months. And they could tell me exactly every word of the story. And it's not because my students are special at LGIS. People think that our school is famous, and no, they're just Taiwanese kids. They came from a regular classroom. But if you tell a good story, and the story will stick. And I was, that's a really great moment as a teacher, where you feel like you did something that worked for them, where they forgot that they were actually learning language and they were just enjoying a good story. So that's that. Does anybody else want to give it a try? You can say no. I will not be upset. Outwardly, on the inside, I will be crying. But how about you guys? Nobody's here to critique you and your drawing skills or your storytelling skills. It's just once you get the practice down of trying it out on a chalkboard, you're going to be much more likely to want to try it out with your kids. So none of us are going to say anything bad, except for Dora. I don't know. Dora might say something. Oh, sorry, I didn't erase it. Oh.
Okay, our story is Dear Zoo.
Dear Zoo.
Yes, there are one person. I wrote to the zoo to send me a to send me an Great, an elephant. They sent me an elephant, but he was too big. He was too big. I sent him back. So they sent me a giraffe. They sent me a giraffe. Great. They sent me a giraffe. He was too tall. I sent him back. So they sent me a mouse lion. Lion. They sent me a lion. But he was too fierce. Too fierce. So I sent him back. So they sent me a camel. Camel. So they sent me a camel. But he was too grumpy. Okay, so I sent him back. So they sent me a snake. Yes, a snake. But he was too scary. So I sent him back, and so he sent me
a butt.
no. Monkey. Yes. But he was too naughty. So I sent him back. So they sent me up. Send me up. Oh, right. Okay. He sent me a cat. But it's too one point. Yes, no. So I sent him back, and then he sent me up. What is
Dog.
yeah, it's a puppy. And it was perfect, so I kept it.
Good. Okay, so they did figure out a way to use the whole chalkboard. They did it. They did it now because the Deer Zoo, most of us probably know this story. One thing that you could do is write, there's like a 2-sentence like back and forth. You know, they sent me you can just write that once, but it was to, so I sent it back. So you can just write those and then go back and forth between the two. When you do story listening, try to not pause while you're drawing. We draw fast, and you can keep like using language while you draw. So like say for the dog, for the puppy, while you're drawing the puppy, you say, oh, here's the head, here's the ear, the nose, the tail, 2 legs, 3, 4 legs, a puppy. So you don't have any gaps while you're talking, which is another reason why we try not to draw like really elaborate or take too much time to draw, because you want as much input, language input, and not just focused on the visual. The visual is only supposed to help with the English word. Solid. This is a very good job. Thank you. I hope that today was a little less boring than the PowerPoint of theories, linguistic theories from last time. I really appreciate you guys getting to come. And of course, this is just one of another. There's still lots to share, lots to learn, but I think we could be at a good place for you to try a story, and then we can talk about it through our line group, or you can join the Facebook group, and we can keep in touch and hopefully start exchanging like what worked for you, what stories really worked with your kids, or where you might need some support from us, where to find other stories, how to adapt those stories. We will be including scripts for adapted stories that Zach and I have used for elementary and junior high school. And always, I upload my story listening videos to YouTube. So that's another option for seeing how the story works with kids. So thank you so much for coming today.